Hi everyone, thanks for joining me. My name is Leo, and this is the LangFest channel. My next guest is the renowned author, professor of linguists, Dr. Stephen Krashen. He joins me from his home in California.
Let's do it.
Okay, well, I guess my first questions is a little bit unusual because I asked that to every polyglot out there how they got started to get interested in languages. So I'll ask you the same kind of thing, but into your field. How did you get interested in linguistics and then eventually into like language acquisition, education? How did it all begin?
No one has ever asked me that before. Wow. Okay, here we go.
Is that a good
Um,
thing or a bad thing?
Great question. It's a great question. I had no interest in it for a long time. I grew up in the Chicago area. Yiddish was the family language, the heritage language, but I paid
I
very little attention to it. My parents understood it and answered my grandparents back in English. Then, and in high school, I took French, and I got a passing grade after 2 years under the condition that I never study French again. And that was to protect my teacher who was doing me a favor, so it wouldn't ruin my record.
I see.
What you did then in the late 50s, if you were middle class, you went to Europe. My parents, who were extremely nice and very good to me, sent me off to Europe for a summer bicycle tour. And that's when I was exposed to all the languages for the first time in context. And the turning point came when we stopped at a youth hostel in Switzerland. And there was a big party. And there were kids all from all over Europe and all over Switzerland, lots of languages. And I sat around watching the kids switch languages effortlessly and easily, going from German to French, talking to us in English. And I thought that was the coolest thing I had ever seen. And I decided when I grow up, I'm going to do this. And I decided then. I'd had a year of German in college before that. Just it was okay. I went off to Paris after that, studied French for a month at the Alliance. It was really fun. Came back, took more French classes until they got too boring. And then I changed my major to music. I got in love with the piano and took a year off and studied with a private piano teacher in Vienna.
Wow.
I had a terrible time with her. Really didn't work. But I acquired German. I had friends and I had a terrific time, and that changed everything. When I got back, I knew my destiny was languages, and it's been languages ever since, doing languages, speaking languages, having a good time. Then it all ended when I went to graduate school in linguistics. Because when you study linguistics, that was the closest thing I could find. You study linguistics, you study grammatical theory, and you don't have any time to do languages. So I spent the next decade doing Chomsky, learning about the left side of the brain, the right side of the brain, ultimately got a job as a professor of linguistics. And the next turning point, this is a great story. I was giving a 2-week course in Hungary, in a city called Page.
Okay.
And my students there told me, while you're in Hungary, you have to meet a woman named Lomb, who is the world's greatest polyglot. This is before Steve Kaufman.
You're right.
Yeah. Another case is so interesting. Anyway, so my student called Lomb, said, Professor Krashen would like to meet you. And Lomb said, so what? And I went anyway. And I met her. I spent 3 2-hour sessions with her. It was wonderful, learning about how she did it. 14 languages. She did most of it in Hungary without traveling, was a translator, etc. Our last moments together, my wife and daughter had joined me in Budapest. I was saying goodbye to Lomb, who was 86 at the time. She took my hand and said to me, Stephen, you're so young. I was 54. So many years left. So many languages to acquire. Isn't that beautiful?
Great.
Since that day, I've been involved with my own personal language acquisition. This is 21 years ago. Every single day since then, inspired by her. And it's helped my theorizing and my research amazing. It's been fantastic. So that's the story. I owe it to Lomb Kató and a kind French teacher.
Well, I will tell you there's a in Montreal right now we have our own young polyglot. His name is Georges Awad, and I
Wow.
interviewed him, and he just turned 18 now, and he's at roughly 16 languages at which he describes
Oh,
at intermediate or higher. He's a very modest young man that is learning six others on the side, but very inspiring story, which I'm sure you'll get a chance to meet.
well, for someone like me, I wouldn't call myself a polyglot, the kind that you're going to have at the conference. But for someone like me who does research, it's
Right.
really important to have several languages going at different levels. German is my best. After that is French. On m'a dit que je parle français comme une vache espagnole. Très bien.
Oui, très
And the
bien.
yeah, the third one is after that is Spanish, where I'm exactly intermediate, which means I'm struggling a lot. There are things I don't understand. Slightly worse in Hebrew. After that, Amharic from Ethiopia in the Peace Corps, and now Mandarin, which is just so exciting. It's
Wow.
amazing to be at the beginner level and understand very little and try to figure out what's going on. So this has been part of my research program.
Good. So, well, I guess I'll skip ahead to a question I've had while I was reading it. We had all sorts of people commenting and wanting to ask you questions, but I guess one of it, which you sort of answered already, but we see this phenomenon, this like these myth, if you say that the earliest you're going to learn a language, the better, and that at a certain point in time, and it differs from people to people, you're at a point of no return where you're too old to learn a language. Now, I'm guessing you said 21 years ago you got inspired, and you learned many since. I'm guessing. So is that true? Is there like an age factor in language acquisition?
I can give you a clear answer and settle it once and for all. The answer is yes and no.
Okay,
Uh, by the way, Steve Kaufman has done a whole bunch of languages since he was 60. He is just,
right. That's,
phenomenal.
that's another good example.
Oh,
But I
he's
guess if I can steer, because you're going to say it's possible, if I can summarize. But what's the difference, I suppose, between a child learning a language and an adult in later years?
okay. First of all, in terms of the neurological difference, the claim is that there's a critical period at puberty. The hemispheres are separated out and you can't do natural language acquisition. This was Eric Lenneberg back in the 1960s. My dissertation said that wasn't true, that the process of separating the two hemispheres, lateralization, is done by age 5. And Lenneberg was very sympathetic with that. I wrote him. So there's no known neurological no neurological barrier. Older you are, the faster you go, especially at beginning stages. If you go to, let's say, Hungary with your 7-year-old daughter, you'll be speaking Hungarian right away. You'll be figuring it out, taking a class. You'll be understanding more, getting more comprehensible input. But
Right.
in 2 years, your daughter will sound Hungarian and you won't. So adults are much, much faster. Kids are better in ultimate attainment, but that's no big deal. Adults, I think, are wonderful at language acquisition. In the absence of social pathology, if you have lots of friends, you get along with people, and you have people to talk to, and if you get lots of input, adults, people who start age 20, 30, 70, doesn't matter, you'll be speaking the language quite well. You will have done nearly all of it, 99%. You might have an accent. You might have a few problems with late acquired morphology, like in English, the third person singular, or articles among Asians and things like that. But really, you've done nearly all of it, and we haven't given adults enough credit. They've gone like, assume it's a 1 mile journey. They've done everything but maybe the last few inches. But our standards are if it's not 100%, it's no good. So adults, I think, are very, very good at language acquisition. We haven't given them credit for their accomplishments. Most important, both children and adults, in my opinion, do it the same way. They subconsciously acquire it through understanding messages. It's the same process. And they go through a fairly predictable order of acquisition, whether you're a child, whether you're an adult, even though the actual path is slightly different for children and adults, it's still predictable. So basically, far more similar than different. There is hope.
Great. So it's never too late to start a language.
It's never too late. I started Mandarin at 74. I'm having a great time.
Right. And I have to say in my Italian class, there's an 80-year-old lady that
All right.
probably made more progress in the language than I have. So she's a perfect example of that.
I'm looking forward to your paper on this 80-year-old lady so I can quote it and use it as evidence. Thank you.
Yes, Professor.
Keep it short, though. 2 pages.
So we talked about age. Is speed another factor? How, like we see in the example I gave of this young man who learned so many so quickly, and you hear of all these stories of people saying I've learned language X, but I've tried, it didn't work, or they've studied it for years and they haven't reached language acquisition. So what's the main problem in language education? Is it mainly like compelling content?
Yes. Comprehensible, compelling content. People tell me all the time when they find out what I do for a living, I took 5 years of French. I can't. This morning, someone told me his son had 3 years of French and couldn't speak, and his family's French origin. It was all high school. If you can acquire a language with traditional language teaching and actually be able to speak it, there's something wrong with you, because that's not the way the brain works. Traditional language teaching uses the absolute wrong system. It requires conscious learning, conscious knowledge, and that's not the way the brain does it. Conscious learning of language is something the brain does very poorly. Natural acquisition, given comprehensible input, interesting stories, does work. And after a year or two of the language, you can actually have conversations. You can actually start to get comprehensible input from the outside world. We don't expect people to be perfect after a language class. We want them to be intermediate, sort of where I am in Spanish. I don't need another Spanish class. I need people to talk to. I need to listen. I need to read a lot. So when classes do that, we have very, very good success. In fact, my reviews of the research, it's never failed. Study after study, comprehensible input methods, beginning with TPR, Jim Asher's great breakthrough, natural approach, Tracy Terrell, TPRS, teaching proficiency through reading and storytelling, Blaine Ray, story listening, Benico Mason. All of them have in common lots of interesting comprehensible input. Intermediate methods, lots of reading and teaching content, making it comprehensible. We've never lost. We have never lost, not once. Sometimes there's a tie if it's a short duration or it's a grammar test, but we have never lost. It is always done very, very well. So that's it. Let's reduce suffering and bring in these methods. The big breakthrough, I think, we owe this to Blaine Ray and TPRS, is popularizing storytelling in the classroom. And Benico Mason is really a powerful method of doing this. That's people want to know more. You can Google TPRS and get lots of stuff, and you can look at benicomason.net and see her papers. Stories make the world go round. A good story in class, the students will acquire the language whether they want to or not. They'll be focused on the story, how it's going to come out. That's been the big breakthrough, and I think the story methods are a lot better than natural approach, even though I get a lot of undeserved credit for natural approach, and I still like it. But the story methods are even better. Let me put it that way.
Great. All right, so you're coming to Montreal for the Language Festival this August. What do what is presenters should expect from a presentation from you?
Well, they don't have to come to it now because I've just spilled the beans. I've just told you everything. But
I was hoping you wouldn't say that. No, still purchase.
Yeah, right. I'll get some data. I'll have some stories. I'll tell a few jokes. And my triumph in Montreal, you wait your whole life to tell a good joke, right? And wait for a chance to do it. I was at, last time I was there, I was at a restaurant with a bunch of Anglophones in the French area. You're going to envy me for this. And the waitress comes over and says, "Qui parle français ici?" And I raised my hand and said, "Je." Laughed. She got it. You wait a linguist special. You wait your whole life for that. Anyway, I'll be adding more detail to it, adding more scientific references and more case histories to back it up. If I have time, I'll talk more about the development of literacy as well, and how the real goal of schooling is to find your path in life, and how reading for pleasure and language classes can help you do that.
Wonderful. Well, looking forward to hearing from you. I guess my last question is, what about the future? You just told us your age, but what's next for you?
Let me quote the American baseball player Yogi Berra.
Why are you apologizing?
Well, United States. You're American too. There's no good adjective for that. Who said, "It's hard to predict, especially about the future." I have no idea what's going to happen next. We have been terrible at predicting the future. It's like making this stuff up as you go. A month ago, and I look at what I'm doing now and what I was doing a month ago, it's like a different world. So much is happening. It's a very exciting time. So in August, when I'm in Montreal, there'll be new stuff. So this conversation might be obsolete. Things are going very quickly. New data comes in all the time. New ideas. It's a wonderful time for language education.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much for taking the time to speak with me today, and hopefully it's the first of many conversations. Perhaps la prochaine fois, on le fera en français aussi.
Oui, on peut faire cela. Okay. And I like that. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, very good, Leo. Nice to talk to you. Un plaisir.
Nice to talk to you too. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching this video. Remember that you can register for the Montreal Language Festival on the website down below, and you can also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Have a nice day.